The millionaire husband forbade his wife from singing. But it was her dream, and when she picked up the microphone, everyone was shocked. Savannah never imagined her life would completely change when she accepted an invitation to a charity event in New Orleans. It was a warm night, and the soft sound of jazz filled the hall, illuminated by crystal chandeliers. She had reluctantly agreed to attend, pushed by a friend, but it seemed fate had been waiting for her. Amid the crowd of sophisticated guests, one man caught her eye. Logan Carter, a renowned and enigmatic businessman, exuded charisma and mystery. He seemed out of place in that environment, as though he had been forced to attend, yet his presence dominated the room. Before continuing, make sure to subscribe to the channel so we can reach our goal of 1,000 subscribers. Savannah and Logan crossed paths by chance when she accidentally spilled her glass of wine on the table where he was seated. Embarrassed, she tried to apologize, but Logan only smiled, a smile that seemed to conceal a million secrets. "Don't worry," he said in a deep, captivating voice. "I believe this might be the most interesting way to start a conversation." That simple yet charming remark sparked a dialogue that lasted for hours. Savannah spoke about her love for music, about how singing was her soul's calling, and Logan listened intently, as if every word she said was precious. As the night unfolded, Savannah felt drawn to the aura of mystery surrounding Logan. He was polite and kind, but there was something in his eyes, a shadow he seemed to carry. Still, she couldn't resist the magnetism he radiated. When the evening came to an end, Logan invited her to dinner the next day, and to her own surprise, Savannah agreed without hesitation. The dinner took place in an exclusive restaurant in the most elegant part of New Orleans. Savannah arrived feeling a bit nervous, but Logan was already waiting for her at a secluded table adorned with candles and flowers. He greeted her with a calm smile that immediately put her at ease. During the dinner, Logan proved to be an attentive listener, genuinely interested in every detail Savannah shared. He asked about her childhood, how she had discovered her passion for music, and why she had not yet pursued a professional career. Hesitantly, Savannah admitted she was afraid she wasn't good enough. Logan's smile faded for a moment, and he took her hand firmly. "You have a light within you, Savannah," he said, looking straight into her eyes. "Never let fear stop you from shining." It was a powerful moment that deeply moved Savannah, yet there was something in the way he spoke those words that hinted at personal pain and experience. The evening continued with laughter and light-hearted conversations, but Savannah couldn't shake the feeling that Logan was hiding something. He was incredibly polite and charming, but he avoided talking about his own life. Whenever she tried to steer the conversation toward him, Logan skillfully redirected it, as though building a wall between them was second nature to him. When Savannah finally asked about his family, he turned his gaze toward the window. "My family is in the past," he replied curtly, before quickly praising the dessert and abruptly ending the topic. Still, the bond between them grew quickly. After that dinner, Logan and Savannah began meeting frequently, and what had started as an intriguing connection transformed into something deeper. Logan was generous, attentive, and made Savannah feel special in a way she had never experienced before. She realized she was falling in love, but at the same time, she felt that the closer she got to him, the less she truly understood who Logan was. He seemed layered, a mixture of tenderness and distance, which only made him more fascinating. When Logan proposed to her just a few months later, Savannah hesitated for only a moment. She was in love and believed their love could overcome any shadows he carried. But deep down, she knew she was accepting more than just a man. She was embracing the mysteries he brought with him. After the wedding, Savannah moved into Logan's mansion in Charleston, South Carolina. The estate was majestic, surrounded by ancient oak trees and a meticulously maintained garden. The interior was equally impressive. Polished wooden floors, impeccably designed furniture, and an art collection that could have belonged in a museum. It all felt like a fairy tale, Yet Savannah experienced a strange unease from the moment she crossed the threshold. The mansion was too quiet, almost stifling, as if it held the echoes of stories no one dared to tell. Soon, Savannah noticed there were areas of the house that were off-limits to her. Certain rooms remained locked, and when she asked Logan about them, he simply dismissed their importance. She tried to respect the boundaries, but she couldn't shake the feeling that he was hiding something. One morning, while Logan was out handling business, Savannah wandered the halls on the second floor. One of the locked rooms had a small crack in the door, allowing her to peek inside. Inside, she saw what appeared to be an abandoned music studio. There was a dusty piano, a shelf filled with sheet music, and old photographs of a woman who bore a striking resemblance to her. When Logan returned that evening, Savannah mentioned the room casually, but his reaction was immediate and intense. He grew visibly upset, saying she shouldn't have gone into that area. The coldness in his tone frightened her, as it was the first time she had seen that side of him. "Some things are meant to stay in the past, Savannah. I hope you'll respect that," he said, ending the conversation abruptly. Despite the incident, Logan remained affectionate and devoted in other ways, as though he was trying to make up for that tense moment. However, Savannah couldn't ignore the growing curiosity within her. Why would such a reserved man have a music studio that seemed untouched for years? Who was the woman in the photos, and why did she look so much like Savannah? These questions began to consume her thoughts, even as she tried to convince herself not to push further. As the days passed, the mansion started to feel more like a prison than a home. Savannah felt isolated, with no friends or neighbors nearby. Logan seemed determined to keep her happy, but there were moments when he would retreat into his own thoughts, leaving a void she didn't know how to fill. She began to question whether she had made a mistake by agreeing to such a whirlwind marriage. Yet something held her back from confronting him again. It was as if she instinctively knew that the truth might be darker than she was prepared to face. One afternoon, while Savannah was tidying up the living room, she felt an irresistible urge to sing. It had been weeks since she had used her voice, stifled by the silent life and the expectations Logan had imposed. The melody of an old song she used to sing in her youth escaped her lips before she could stop herself. Her voice filled the room, echoing off the high walls of the mansion, as if breathing life into the space. The moment she finished the first verse, Logan appeared in the doorway. His expression was somewhere between anger and despair, a look so intense that Savannah immediately stopped. He walked toward her, each step seeming heavier than the last, and gripped her shoulders firmly. "I told you not to sing, Savannah," he said, his voice laced with an anguish she couldn't understand. "I don't want that to be part of our life. Don't ever do it again." Savannah was stunned, both by the tone and the unexpected severity of his words. "But why, Logan? Singing is part of who I am. I can't just give it up." He stepped back, running a hand through his hair in a gesture of frustration. For a moment, it seemed like he was about to explain, but all he said was, "Some things are dangerous, and you need to trust me. I only want to protect you." Although Logan later tried to ease the tension with kind words and affectionate gestures, Savannah knew something had changed between them. Logan became more watchful, as if he feared she might disobey his orders. Savannah, on the other hand, grew even more determined to uncover what lay behind his absurd prohibition. He acted as if the simple act of singing could unleash some kind of catastrophe, and that only deepened her curiosity. But there was another side to it. In the days that followed, Savannah noticed that Logan seemed genuinely shaken by the episode. He began sleeping less, spending hours in his office or pacing the property late at night. Sometimes, she overheard him muttering to himself, but the words were indistinct. It was as if the music had awakened a ghost he had spent years trying to bury. Savannah's unease grew with each passing day. She tried to find logical explanations, but the pieces of the puzzle didn't fit together. What was so terrible about music? Why did Logan seem to carry such a heavy burden? And most importantly, what was he hiding from her? On a gray morning, Savannah decided to leave the mansion and take a walk around the city. She needed air, space, and, above all, something to reconnect her with the outside world. Logan had left early, leaving her alone. As she strolled through the streets of Charleston, she came across a poster taped to the window of a local cafe. It was an announcement for a talent competition happening in 2 weeks. The promise of a stage and an audience reignited something within her, a long-forgotten desire. Savannah felt a mix of excitement and fear. Participating would be a direct defiance of Logan's rules, but the thought of singing again, of feeling the freedom that music always brought her, was irresistible. Without overthinking it, she stepped into the cafe and filled out the registration form. She used a pseudonym, fearing Logan might find out, and left the place with her heart racing. In the days that followed, Savannah began rehearsing in secret. When Logan was out, she would lock the bedroom door and sing softly, careful not to be heard. Each note made her feel alive again, as if she were reconnecting with parts of herself that had lain dormant since her marriage. Music was more than a passion. It was her essence, something even Logan's love couldn't take away. Still, the guilt began to weigh on her. Whenever she looked at Logan, she felt a mix of affection and betrayal. He remained the man she loved, but the silence he demanded was suffocating. Savannah tried to justify her actions, telling herself he didn't need to know. After all, she wasn't hurting anyone. Yet, the burden of her secret followed her like a shadow. One evening, Logan surprised her by asking about her day. Savannah stammered a response, trying to sound casual, but he narrowed his eyes, as if sensing something was off. "You seem different, Savannah," he said, his tone both curious and cautious. She quickly changed the subject, but the exchange made it clear that Logan was starting to notice changes in her. As the competition date approached, Savannah felt torn. There was the thrill of the stage and the promise of something she had always dreamed of, but also the fear of what would happen if Logan found out. Something inside her told her this choice would change everything between them, but it was a risk she was willing to take. The day of the competition was drawing near, yet Savannah felt there were still unanswered questions about Logan and his insistence on keeping music out of their lives. Driven by curiosity and her growing discomfort, she decided to explore the mansion once more. While Logan was away at a meeting out of town, she returned to the locked room she had peeked into before. This time, she found a key in the drawer of his office, a small golden piece that seemed forgotten. With her heart pounding, she unlocked the door. The room was just as she remembered, a music studio covered in a fine layer of dust, as though no one had entered for years. At the center, an antique piano dominated the space, and beside it stood a pedestal with a vintage microphone. Savannah felt a chill as she touched the piano keys, which produced a hauntingly melancholic sound, as if they carried tragic stories within them. On the walls, black and white photographs displayed a young, beautiful woman who bore a striking resemblance to Savannah. In a corner, she found a wooden box. Opening it, she discovered sheet music scribbled with sentimental lyrics. More intriguingly, there were letters inside, all addressed to Logan. The handwriting was elegant, filled with words of love and longing. "My music is for you," read one of the letters. Savannah leafed through more papers until she found a folded newspaper clipping. The headline read, "Tragedy on Stage. Talented singer dies under mysterious circumstances." The accompanying photo was of the same woman from the letters and photographs. Savannah felt frozen. The words in the article were vague, mentioning a sudden collapse during a performance and the suspicion of inexplicable causes. The woman's name, Lydia Carter, made her recoil. It was clear Logan had been married before, something he had never mentioned. More than that, Lydia seemed to have been a singer, someone whose talent had been abruptly and definitively silenced. Savannah wondered what Logan was hiding about this story. Was it fear, guilt, or something darker? Hearing the sound of tires on the gravel outside, She quickly put everything back in place and locked the door. Logan was home. Savannah went downstairs to greet him with a forced smile, but her mind was racing with her newfound discoveries. As he embraced her and asked about her day, she realized how full of gaps their life together was. Every affectionate gesture from Logan, once comforting, now seemed to mask something she couldn't fully grasp. Savannah knew she could no longer ignore Logan's past. It was the key to understanding the prohibition he had so adamantly imposed on her. Yet, the discovery also solidified her resolve to participate in the competition. Singing was her way of reclaiming who she was, despite the secrets and shadows surrounding her. The following days were marked by a strange tension between Savannah and Logan. Although he didn't seem to suspect she had discovered the studio, the weight of what she knew began to show. Savannah noticed every detail: Logan's distant stares, the moments he seemed lost in thought. He was more vigilant, as if sensing something, but also more protective, compensating with acts of kindness and gifts. For Savannah, these gestures only deepened the burden of what she had uncovered. One night, Logan entered the living room while Savannah was reading. He watched her in silence for a few moments before asking, "Are you happy here?" The question caught her off guard, but she responded with a hesitant smile. "I am. But sometimes, I feel like something is missing. Like there's a part of me I still can't reach." Logan tilted his head, seeming to ponder her words. "Sometimes, protecting the ones we love means keeping them from certain paths. You understand that, don't you?" Those words left Savannah uneasy. It was clear he was trying to justify something without fully revealing what it was. The weight of the secret she carried began to press down on her. She wanted to confront him, to ask about Lydia, but she feared it might cause an irreparable rift between them. Instead, she decided to keep rehearsing and focus on the competition, even as her heart became increasingly torn between guilt and the desire to be free. While practicing in secret, Savannah began to feel like she was being watched. At times, in the mansion's silence, she would hear footsteps or the sound of something shifting on the other side of the door. When she opened it to check, there was no one there. On one occasion, she found the bedroom door slightly ajar, even though she was certain she had closed it. Logan seemed to be around more often, as if monitoring her movements, but she couldn't be sure if it was paranoia or if he truly knew. The night before the competition was particularly tense. Logan was more withdrawn than usual, and Savannah struggled to maintain the appearance of normalcy. When he finally went to bed, she stayed seated in the bedroom, contemplating the choices she had made. Music was her dream, but now it also felt like a challenge, something that jeopardized her relationship and perhaps even her safety. Yet the thought of giving up was unbearable. Savannah resolved that no matter what happened, she would step onto that stage. Before going to bed, she walked to the window and looked out at the mansion's garden, bathed in moonlight. There, in the midst of the silence, she vowed to herself that she would do it, not just for herself, but for all the time she had been silenced. Music was her truth, and no prohibition would stop her from singing. The next morning, Savannah woke up determined to confront Logan about everything she had discovered. The tension between them had become unbearable, and she knew she couldn't continue living surrounded by secrets. She found him in the garden, gazing at the horizon with a distant look. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the trees, creating a serene atmosphere that starkly contrasted with the turmoil in her heart. "We need to talk," she said, approaching him cautiously. Logan turned slowly, his eyes reflecting a mixture of worry and resignation. "I found the music studio in the mansion," Savannah confessed, carefully watching his reaction. For a moment, Logan closed his eyes, as if summoning the strength to face what was coming. "I figured this day would come," he replied, his voice heavy. "There are things about my past I've been avoiding, but I suppose I can't hide them anymore." He motioned for her to sit beside him on a stone bench beneath an ancient tree. The silence between them was thick, laden with unspoken words. "Who was Lydia?" Savannah asked, her voice barely a whisper. Logan let out a deep sigh before responding. Lydia was my wife. Talented singer, like you. She had a voice that could touch anyone's soul. His eyes drifted into distant memories. We met under circumstances similar to ours. I fell madly in love with her. Savannah felt a pang in her chest, a mixture of jealousy and empathy. What happened to her? She asked. Logan hesitated before continuing. During one of her performances, something terrible happened. Lydia, she collapsed on stage. The doctors were never able to fully explain what occurred. It was as if her life was drained from her in that moment. His voice cracked, and he struggled to keep his composure. Since then, I can't bear the thought of seeing someone I love singing in public. I'm terrified of reliving that pain, of losing someone again. Logan took Savannah's hand, his gaze pleading. Please understand, my prohibition isn't about controlling you, it's about protecting you. I couldn't bear to go through that again. Savannah felt tears welling in her eyes. The revelation explained so much, but it also brought new dilemmas. Logan, I'm so sorry for what happened to Lydia, but you can't stop me from pursuing my dream. Singing is part of who I am, just like it was part of her. He shook his head, the anguish evident in his expression. I know, but the fear is greater than I can control. She squeezed his hand gently. Maybe we can face that fear together. I don't want to hide anything from you, and I don't want our secrets to push us apart. Logan looked at her with a mixture of hope and fear. Do you really think we can overcome this? Savannah gave him a small, reassuring smile. I believe love is stronger than any fear. But we need to be honest with each other. The moment was interrupted by the ring of Logan's phone. He answered quickly, exchanging a few brief words before hanging up. I have to take care of something urgent. Can we continue this conversation later? Savannah nodded, though she wished he would stay. As she watched him walk away, she felt that, despite the revelation, there was still so much left to uncover. After Logan left, Savannah felt the weight of their conversation still lingering over her. On one hand, understanding Logan's trauma made her empathize with him more deeply, but on the other, her resolve to pursue her dream felt stronger than ever. The story about Lydia revealed the complexity of the fear he carried, yet it also reinforced the sense that music was too powerful to be denied. That night, while Logan was still away, Savannah went to the music studio and picked up the antique microphone. It was an elegant object, but it carried a past that now felt as close to her as a shadow. She held it firmly, gazing at her reflection in the mirror. I'm going to sing, she said aloud, as if making a vow. The microphone, in its simplicity, felt like a symbol of her resistance against the fear Logan was trying to impose. The next day, Savannah prepared herself for the competition. She chose an elegant yet simple dress that made her feel confident. That afternoon, she rehearsed her song softly, each note filled with her passion and a touch of nervousness. Logan had yet to return, and she considered this a blessing. Facing him before stepping onto the stage might shake her resolve. When evening came, Savannah drove herself to the competition venue. The club was small but inviting, with warm lights that created an intimate atmosphere. The sound of laughter and chatter filled the room as the other competitors prepared. Savannah took in the scene with a mix of anxiety and excitement. This was her dream taking shape, even though it carried the weight of uncertainty. When her stage name was called, Savannah felt a chill run down her spine. She stepped onto the stage, clutching the microphone tightly. The lights focused on her, and for a moment, everything around her seemed to disappear. The audience fell silent, and Savannah's heartbeat was so loud she could almost hear it. Then, she took a deep breath and began to sing. Her voice echoed through the space, strong and clear, every note carrying a blend of emotion and freedom. Time seemed to slow as Savannah lost herself in the music, her memories and feelings flowing through her voice. The audience's reaction was immediate. faces that had been distracted were now captivated. Some moved, others mesmerized. Savannah felt something awaken within her, something she hadn't experienced in a long time. It was as if she were finally whole. When she finished, there was a brief moment of silence before applause erupted. The joy in her eyes shone brightly, but then she noticed a figure in the crowd that froze her in place. Logan was there, standing near the door, his face a mixture of shock, anger, and something she couldn't decipher. Savannah's stomach churned. He had found her. Descending from the stage, she was overwhelmed by a mix of accomplishment and panic. The warmth of the applause still echoed in her ears, but Logan's presence, unmoving at the entrance of the club, made her hesitate. He didn't clap, didn't move, only stared at her with a gaze that seemed to pierce through her. For a moment, she stood paralyzed, unsure whether to approach him or disappear into the crowd. Logan began walking toward her, his steps steady but controlled. His expression was unreadable, a blend of fury and something deeper, perhaps pain. Savannah tried to compose herself, but her heart was racing. When he finally stopped in front of her, the noise around them seemed to vanish. "Can we talk outside?" he asked, his voice low but tense. She followed him out of the club, where the night air was cold and heavy. The silence between them was suffocating. Logan turned to her, his eyes glinting under the dim streetlights. "Why did you do this, Savannah? I asked for one thing, just one thing." His voice was calm, but the intensity in it was sharp. Savannah felt the words struggling to emerge, but when she finally found her voice, it was steadier than she expected. "Because it's who I am, Logan. Singing is part of me, and you can't expect me to erase that just because of your fear." He looked away, as though her words had physically struck him. "You don't understand," he said, almost in a whisper. "I've seen this happen before. I've seen what music can take from someone, what it can destroy." Savannah stepped closer, refusing to back down. "But you're wrong. Music doesn't destroy, Logan. It heals, it gives life. It wasn't music that took Lydia, it was fear. The same fear you're trying to put between us." Logan stared at her, his eyes now filled with something that resembled desperation. "What if I'm right? What if it hurts you too? I can't go through that again, Savannah. I just can't." A heavy silence settled between them, filling the space as if it were tangible. Savannah took a deep breath, feeling the cold air fill her lungs. "I understand what you're saying, Logan. I understand your fear and your pain. But you need to understand something too. I can't live a life where I'm not whole, where I'm constantly walking on eggshells to avoid waking your ghosts." She reached for his hand, her voice now softer. "If you love me, you need to trust me. Trust that I know what I'm doing." Logan didn't respond immediately. His eyes were fixed on her, but it seemed as though he was looking inward, fighting an internal battle only he could understand. When he finally spoke, his voice was almost broken. "I love you, Savannah, more than anything, but I don't know if I'm strong enough to face this." She tightened her grip on his hand, trying to convey some courage. "Then maybe it's time to find out." The days that followed that night were marked by an uneasy silence in the mansion. Savannah and Logan barely exchanged words, caught in a limbo of conflicting emotions. She knew her decision to sing had shaken something deep within him, but she also believed she had planted a seed of reflection. Despite the weight of the tension, Savannah felt she couldn't back down now. The path to freedom, for both of them, lay in confronting what they had both been avoiding. One afternoon, while Savannah was in the garden trying to find clarity amidst her thoughts, she saw Logan leaving the house with a somber expression. He looked at her for a moment before saying in a neutral tone, "I have something to take care of in the city. I'll be back later." She nodded, but his urgency left her intrigued. It was rare for Logan to leave without notifying her in advance. Unable to shake her growing unease, Savannah went back into the house and wandered through the halls. When she passed the door to the music studio, A wave of courage mixed with curiosity washed over her. She entered again, this time without hesitation, determined to explore every corner. Opening a drawer in the cabinet, she found more letters from Lydia, written in a tone that oscillated between deep love and fear. One phrase in particular caught her attention. "Logan, music is everything to me, but sometimes I feel like it's consuming me. I can't stop, but I'm afraid of what it might mean." A chill ran down Savannah's spine. The letter seemed to suggest that Lydia had known something was wrong, something Logan might have also noticed but chosen to ignore. As she continued going through the papers, she found a worn, leather-bound diary. The pages, filled with Lydia's elegant handwriting, were brimming with thoughts about her career, her fears, and her relationship with Logan. On one of the final pages, there was an enigmatic entry. "Music brings life, but it can also bring shadows. I need to understand what's happening before it's too late." As she read, Savannah began to realize there was more to Lydia's story than Logan was willing to admit. It wasn't just about a tragic accident or an inexplicable collapse on stage. There was something darker, something Logan might have been trying to bury along with his memories. She wondered if Logan's fear wasn't just about losing someone he loved, but also about facing a truth he couldn't bring himself to confront. When Logan returned that night, his expression was tense, though he tried to act as if everything were normal. During dinner, Savannah couldn't hold back her curiosity. "Logan, what did Lydia mean when she wrote that music could bring shadows?" He froze, his fork suspended mid-air. His eyes locked onto hers, and for a moment, he seemed to wrestle with a wave of emotions threatening to overwhelm him. "You went into the studio again?" he asked, his voice a mix of exhaustion and frustration. Savannah didn't apologize. "Yes, and I found things you've never told me. It's clear Lydia knew something was wrong, but you've never explained what really happened. I need to know, Logan. I can't live surrounded by half-truths." Logan stood slowly, running a hand over his face as if trying to collect himself. "You want the truth?" he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Then prepare yourself, because it won't be easy to hear." He sat down again, but there was something different about his posture. He seemed smaller, as if the weight of years spent harboring secrets was finally beginning to crush him. Savannah kept her gaze steady, determined not to back down. He let out a deep sigh before beginning, his voice low and hesitant. "Lydia was brilliant. Her music had an energy no one could ignore. But over time, I started noticing something changing in her. At first, it was small things. She'd be more tired after performances, sometimes distant, lost in thought. I assumed it was just the strain of her career, so I didn't push her." He paused, his eyes drifting as if searching for memories in some far-off place. But then, things got worse. Lydia started having strange dreams, almost visions. She said she felt like she was being pulled somewhere else while she sang, like her music was opening a door to something she couldn't control. I thought it was just stress, but she was convinced it was something more. She talked about shadows, things she felt around her while she was on stage. Savannah shivered as she listened, but she didn't interrupt. Logan continued, his voice growing heavier. "The night she died, I was there. It was a major performance, the largest audience she'd ever had. When she started singing, something changed. It wasn't just the music, Savannah. It was like she was in a trance. I saw her face, the way her eyes went glassy, as if she wasn't there anymore. When the song ended, she collapsed on stage. There was no explanation. No doctor could understand. She was gone." He stopped, his breathing uneven, and looked directly at Savannah. "Since that night, I can't hear music without remembering what happened. I don't know if it was just her mind playing tricks on her or something real, but I can't ignore what I saw. I can't risk losing you the same way." Savannah felt a lump in her throat but remained composed. "Logan, I understand what you went through, and I'm so sorry for the pain you carry. But that doesn't mean the same thing will happen to me. Music doesn't consume me, it gives me strength. And maybe what happened to Lydia wasn't what you think it was. Maybe it wasn't something supernatural, but something she was dealing with on her own. Logan shook his head, visibly torn between accepting Savannah's words or clinging to the fear that had held him captive for so long. I don't know, Savannah. I don't know what to believe anymore. But what I do know is that I couldn't bear to lose you. She gently touched his hand, her voice steady. You won't lose me, Logan. But you have to trust me. Music is part of who I am, and denying that would be like losing myself. The silence between them was heavy with emotion, but for the first time, Logan didn't seem to resist. He was confronting something he had avoided for years, and Savannah knew this conversation was just the beginning of a long journey. They both had much to face, but for the first time, there was a real chance they could do it together. After that night, Logan began to change. He was quieter, but not with the coldness of before. It was as if he were absorbing Savannah's words, trying to process what she had said, and confront the ghosts that haunted him. Savannah, on her part, felt that for the first time, she had created a crack in the wall Logan had built around himself. Even so, she knew this was only a small victory in a much larger battle. A few days later, while tidying up the music studio, Savannah found an old cassette tape in a drawer. The label was faded, but Lydia's name was still visible. Without hesitation, she placed the tape in a recorder in the room and pressed play. Lydia's voice filled the space, soft and melancholic, with an almost ethereal quality. Savannah stood frozen, captivated by the depth of Lydia's performance and the similarity between their styles. But as the music played on, Savannah felt something unusual. It was as if the air in the studio grew heavier, and a sense of unease began to take hold. She stopped the recording, her breathing slightly quickened. She couldn't tell if what she felt was real or a suggestion created by Logan's stories. Even so, she decided to keep the tape. Felt important, as though it might hold answers that Logan couldn't provide. Later that evening, during dinner, Savannah decided to share what she had found. I listened to a recording of Lydia today, she said, carefully watching Logan's reaction. He froze, his fork hovering inches above his plate. His eyes darkened for a moment before he finally spoke. You shouldn't have touched that. Savannah remained calm. Logan, I needed to understand. Her voice. It's beautiful. But there's something in the music, something that feels different. Didn't you ever notice it? He ran a hand over his face, exhaling a heavy sigh. I could never bring myself to listen to her recordings after she was gone. It was too painful. Maybe you're feeling what she talked about, the shadows she mentioned. Savannah considered his words, but something inside her resisted the idea that Lydia's music was the cause of her tragedy. There was more to this story, something no one had uncovered yet. What if it wasn't shadows, Logan? What if it was something she was struggling with on her own but couldn't share? Logan looked hesitant, as though her suggestion made him uncomfortable. I don't know, Savannah. All I know is that the music took her away. That's enough for me. Despite Logan's resistance, Savannah was convinced she needed to dig deeper. The pieces of the puzzle were there, scattered across the past, but something was missing to tie it all together. Above all, she knew she couldn't let Logan's fear define her own path. I'm going to find out what happened, Logan, she said, her voice firm but filled with empathy. For me, and maybe for you too. Logan didn't respond, but the look in his eyes was a mixture of exhaustion and resignation. Savannah knew he was fighting an internal battle as significant as her own, and while she didn't know where it would lead them, she felt she was finally heading in the right direction. Determined to unravel the mystery surrounding Lydia and her music, Savannah decided to seek out someone who might offer a fresh perspective. After some discreet research in town, she discovered that one of Lydia's old friends, a music producer named Ethan Blake, still lived in Charleston. He was known for his talent but had withdrawn from the music scene after Lydia's death. Savannah was hesitant to contact him, fearing it might reopen old wounds. But she knew he might hold answers Logan couldn't or wouldn't provide. Ethan agreed to meet her at a quiet cafe in the heart of the city. When she arrived, he was already there, seated at a table in the back with a contemplative air. He was a man in his 40s, with gray streaks at his temples and eyes that seemed to carry an invisible burden. He greeted her with a firm handshake, but his expression shifted when he heard Lydia's name. "You're Logan's wife, aren't you?" He assessed her with an intense gaze before leaning back in his chair. "What exactly do you want to know?" Savannah explained her connection to music and how she had uncovered parts of Lydia's past. Ethan listened in silence, but his eyes narrowed when she mentioned the shadows Lydia had spoken about. "I remember that," he said, his voice low. "At first, we thought it was just a metaphor, something artistic. Lydia was always very expressive with her emotions, but over time, it started to feel more real. She said that when she sang, she felt like something was drawing closer, something she couldn't see but that was always lurking." He paused, staring at the coffee cup in his hands. "The last time I spoke to her was 2 days before her final performance. She seemed different. She was anxious but also determined. She said singing was all that mattered to her, that she was willing to face anything, no matter the cost. I never thought she meant it literally." Ethan exhaled deeply, his eyes glistening with unspoken pain. "When I heard what happened, I was devastated. I haven't been able to listen to music since." A chill ran down Savannah's spine. Ethan's words echoed Logan's but carried something more, something that hinted at a deeper, more complex truth. "Do you think her music was dangerous?" she asked cautiously. Ethan hesitated before answering. "I don't know. Maybe it was dangerous for her, but I never saw it as something supernatural. I think Lydia carried a burden no one fully understood. She used music to free herself, but maybe it also consumed her." When Savannah thanked him for the conversation, Ethan held her hand for a moment, his expression serious. "If you're trying to follow the same path as Lydia, be careful. Don't let her fears become yours, but don't ignore the signs either." Savannah nodded, feeling the weight of his words as she left the cafe. Back at the mansion, she found Logan waiting for her. He seemed calmer than he had been in recent days, but still distant. "Where were you?" he asked, trying to sound casual, though his tone betrayed his concern. "I went to see Ethan Blake," Savannah said directly. Logan froze, his expression shifting instantly. "Why? What did he say?" She shrugged, trying to soften the blow. "He talked about Lydia, about how she used music to cope with things. I don't think she was being consumed by something external, Logan. I think she was battling something within herself." Logan looked as though he wanted to respond but didn't. Instead, he turned his gaze away, clearly unsettled. Savannah realized that even with all the revelations, there was still something he wasn't telling her, something that could hold the key to understanding the entire story. Savannah knew Logan's reluctance to reveal everything stemmed from his trauma, but his insistence on keeping parts of the story hidden only fueled her determination to uncover the truth. That night, while he slept, Savannah retrieved Lydia's diary once more. She flipped through the pages, searching for anything that could connect the puzzle pieces, until she found an entry she hadn't noticed before. It was written in hurried, almost desperate handwriting. "Logan is worried. He thinks my music is consuming me, but he doesn't understand. It's not the music, it's what I feel when I sing. It's as if the emotions I pour into the notes draw something in, something I can't explain. I don't know if it's real or just my mind, but I need to keep going. Singing is the only thing keeping me alive, and yet I feel like it's what's bringing me closer to the edge." Lydia's words read like a cry for help, but also a declaration of her devotion to music. Savannah closed the diary, feeling a mix of empathy and unease. It seemed Lydia was trapped between her love for music and something she couldn't control. The next morning, Savannah confronted Logan again. This time, she didn't want half-truths. "Logan, I read more of Lydia's diary. She believed her music was drawing something in, but she was also determined to keep going. Why didn't you ever tell me she was dealing with this alone? You knew how much she was struggling. Logan looked at Savannah with tired eyes, as though he had been carrying the weight of this conversation for years. Because I blame myself, Savannah. I knew she was dealing with something, but I didn't do anything. I thought she would get through it, that it was just part of her creative process. But on her last night, I saw it in her eyes. It wasn't just that. It was something deeper, something I couldn't understand. And then she was gone. Savannah held his hand, trying to give him some strength. You can't carry this guilt forever, Logan. Lydia made her choices, and maybe she didn't share everything with you because she knew it was something she had to face on her own. Logan shook his head but didn't respond. He seemed lost in his own thoughts, grappling with the idea that Lydia's tragedy might not have been his responsibility. Savannah knew this was an important step, but it wasn't enough. She needed to show Logan that music wasn't the enemy, but rather a reflection of the emotions they carried within themselves. Later, Savannah decided there was only one way to prove this. She played Lydia's recording again in the studio and began singing along. Her voice intertwined with Lydia's, creating a harmony that seemed to fill the room with something almost tangible. But this time, Savannah didn't feel the unease she had noticed before. Instead, she felt empowered, as though she were confronting the fear that had haunted both Logan and herself. When Logan heard the music coming from the studio, he rushed in, his expression pure panic. "What are you doing?" he shouted, but stopped as he saw her singing. He froze in the doorway, watching as Savannah finished the last note, her voice steady and unwavering. "I'm showing you there's nothing to fear, Logan. Music doesn't destroy, it liberates. And maybe, if you can listen, you'll see that Lydia's music didn't consume her. She chose to give her all to it." Logan stayed silent, but for the first time, his posture relaxed slightly. He seemed to be wrestling with his own emotions, but he didn't stop Savannah. She knew there was still much to face, but that moment was a small victory, a sign that fear didn't have to rule their lives forever. Savannah understood that their journey was far from over, but that moment in the studio with Logan was a turning point. In the days that followed, he began confronting his own demons, allowing himself to talk more about Lydia and the weight of her loss. Though his words were still filled with pain, there was a softness in his tone that Savannah had never heard before. He no longer stopped her from singing, though he still couldn't bring himself to listen. Every note seemed to remind him of a past he was struggling to move beyond. Savannah, on the other hand, felt more connected to her music than ever. She decided to enter another competition, this time not in secret, but with Logan fully aware. When she told him, he stayed silent, but to her surprise, he didn't try to stop her. He simply said, "I'm not ready to watch yet, but I want you to go. Do this for yourself." Those words were a greater gesture than Savannah could have hoped for, and she knew it was the first step toward freeing them both from the weight of the past. On the night of the competition, Savannah stepped onto the stage with a calmness she hadn't felt before. This time, singing wasn't just about fulfilling her dream. It was about showing Logan, herself, and the world that music wasn't something to fear, but something to celebrate. As she began to sing, her voice filled the space with an intensity that seemed to illuminate every corner of the room. She chose a song written by Lydia, found in the diary, as a way to honor her memory and transform it into something new. The audience's reaction was overwhelming. When she finished, Savannah felt an indescribable sense of relief, as though she had finally found her voice, free from the shadows that had once surrounded her. In the crowd, she spotted a familiar figure standing out. Logan was there, standing at the back of the room, his face reflecting a mixture of emotion and admiration. He didn't clap, but his eyes said everything. After the performance, Savannah found Logan waiting for her in the lobby. At first, he didn't say anything, only embraced her tightly. When he finally spoke, his voice was hoarse. "You were right, Savannah. Her music, your music, It doesn't destroy. It heals. I just couldn't see it until now. Savannah held his face in her hands, smiling tenderly. I didn't want to challenge you, Logan. I just wanted you to see what music truly means. To me, to you, to Lydia. He nodded, finally letting the tears he had held back for years fall freely. In the months that followed, Logan began to open up more. He listened to Savannah sing, though he couldn't always bring himself to watch her perform. It was a slow process, but every step was a victory. Savannah also began working on an album, a tribute to Lydia, using songs from the diary along with some of her own compositions. It was her way of transforming Lydia's pain and love into something that could inspire others. On the anniversary of Lydia's final performance, Savannah organized a small concert at the mansion. She invited Ethan and a few close friends. Logan agreed to attend, albeit hesitantly. When Savannah began singing the song Lydia had written, something shifted. Logan, seated in the front row, closed his eyes and let the melody wash over him. For the first time, he seemed truly at peace. When the song ended, Savannah looked at him, and the smile on his face said it all. The music hadn't just healed Savannah. It had rescued Logan from a cycle of guilt and pain he had carried for so long. Together, they were finally able to look toward the future, free from the shadows of the past. Just like Logan, many of us carry fears that paralyze us, that keep us from seeing beyond the shadows of our past. These fears might stem from painful experiences, losses, or even insecurities we create to protect ourselves. But does protecting ourselves really mean living? Does denying parts of who we are truly keep us safe? Or does it trap us in an incomplete life? And like Savannah, how often do we set aside our dreams to please others, to avoid confrontation, to escape discomfort? How far are we willing to go to fight for what makes us feel alive? Remember, life, like music, draws its strength from allowing every note to be felt. And even if some notes are dissonant, it's only by playing the entire melody that we find harmony. What dreams have you left untouched? What fears do you need to transform into courage? The stage of your life is waiting for you. If you enjoyed this video, let us know in the comments. Your opinion is very important to us. Don't forget to subscribe. A big hug, and see you in the next video.